My wife thought I was too weak to notice she was testing me, but what she didn't expect was that I was testing her back. And when I hit my limit, I didn't yell, didn't fight. I just quietly unraveled everything she thought she controlled and walked away on my own terms. There's a particular silence that doesn't feel like peace. It hums with tension, with judgment. Mark felt it the moment he walked through the door. His wife, Lauren, didn't look up from her laptop. The usual "hey babe" was missing. Instead, there was a single clipped like she'd heard him but didn't feel the need to react. That was new. Mark set down his bag and glanced toward the kitchen. Dinner sat on the counter, plastic takeout containers, lids half open, steam still clinging to the insides. No note, no "thought you'd like this." Just food placed down like a transaction. He was tired. Meetings had drained him. Traffic had tested his patience. But fatigue didn't blur the sense that something was off. He tried to shake it. Everyone has bad days. Maybe Lauren had one too. Still, when he sat beside her and suggested watching a movie, she slid her legs away as if avoiding a stranger's touch. "I'm fine where I am," she muttered, her eyes never leaving the screen. That night, Mark lay awake beside her. Not angry, just confused. He replayed conversations in his head, tried to recall if he'd missed an anniversary, said something insensitive, dropped a promise he'd forgotten, but none of it fit. This wasn't a reaction. It felt like a decision. The next day, he left early for work and came home late after helping a colleague wrap up a project. He'd texted Lauren to let her know. She never replied. When he got home, she was laughing at something on her laptop, wine glass in hand. Not once did she acknowledge him walking in. The gap between them was no longer emotional. It was deliberate. By day 3, the pattern was unmistakable. That morning, Mark brewed 2 cups of coffee like always. Usually that earned him a smile. Instead, Lauren picked up the mug, sniffed it, and poured it down the sink. No words, just contempt, casual and sharp. Later that day, she posted a photo of herself at a trendy downtown cafe they'd once talked about visiting together. The caption, "Finally eating where I want. No more waiting on someone else's schedule." Mark saw it, of course. She made sure he would. That night, she reminded him they were supposed to attend her friend's dinner party. Mark had forgotten. She hadn't, and was already dressed when she asked if he was coming or not. At the party, Lauren was magnetic, laughing, flirting, disappearing into conversations without once looking his way. Mark drifted along the edges of the evening, nodding politely to her friends, ignored in the background like a misplaced accessory. He watched her from across the room, how she came alive when she wasn't around him. And when their eyes met briefly, she smiled. Not warmly, more like someone who knew they'd want to bet. Later at home, Mark lay in bed, silent. But now it wasn't confusion that kept him awake. It was clarity. This wasn't a rough patch. Lauren wasn't withdrawing because of stress or miscommunication. She was watching, testing, seeing how much disrespect she could unload before he finally noticed. He didn't say anything the next day. He just paid attention. That afternoon, they attended a family birthday party. Lauren's nephew. She insisted they go as a couple. The first time in weeks she used that word. But Mark felt the setup. On the way, she giggled at her phone. When he glanced, she tilted the screen away. At the party, she blended in with the crowd easily. Her sister greeted him kindly, but there was something behind her smile, like she knew something he didn't. As Mark walked back from the cooler with 2 beers in hand, he heard Lauren's voice behind the patio wall. Her tone was light, joking, surrounded by laughter. "Marriage is like a game of chicken," she said. "Push and push until someone blinks." One of the women laughed. "How far have you pushed him?" Lauren responded with a giggle. "Honestly, I swear I could sleep in another guy's bed, and he'd just ask if I remembered to use protection." Laughter exploded from the group. Mark froze. She wasn't venting. She was performing, joking about humiliating him while her friends laughed like it was entertainment. "He still pays the bills. Still opens doors for me," she added. "All I have to do is say I'm tired or stressed, and he backs off." It's kind of pathetic. Mark didn't drop the beers, didn't storm over. He turned and walked back inside, handed her the drink with a smile. She winked. That was the moment it all shifted, not just in his mind, but in his resolve. Lauren thought she was the one testing. What she didn't realize is that she just failed his. The next morning, Mark made a single cup of coffee. No second mug, no note, no attempt at normal. Lauren noticed. She lingered at the kitchen doorway, half expecting their routine to resume. It didn't. Mark sipped his coffee and headed out without a word. Around noon, her text arrived. "Everything okay?" He didn't reply. When he got home, she was at the door, casual concern in her voice. "You didn't answer me." "I was busy," Mark said, brushing past her. She stood there, unsure how to respond. That was new. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't sulk. He simply stopped feeding the game. That night, while she scrolled through her phone on the couch, he sat in the garage. Laptop open, screen filled with tabs. Bank policies, legal advice forms, articles on psychological manipulation in marriage. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was preparing. Monday morning, he quietly logged into their joint account. No major moves, just paused a few automatic payments she relied on. Her gym subscription, clothing deliveries, a couple of app services, small luxuries, things Mark never used but always paid for. He didn't mention it, didn't need to. Let her discover them when they bounced. Tuesday, he had their mortgage alerts redirected to his work email. He wasn't hiding anything, just removing her access to information she'd never respected anyway. But the biggest shift wasn't money, it was him. When Lauren made sarcastic jabs, he didn't bite. When she criticized his long hours or unshaven face, he nodded and kept walking. When she tossed out barbed comments over dinner, "So the ghost speaks now?" he replied evenly, "I've always spoken. You just stopped listening." Her fork paused midair. She wasn't used to that, not calm defiance. It disarmed her. By Thursday, Lauren's sarcasm turned sharper, her tone more insistent, but Mark saw it for what it was, desperation wrapped in mockery. She needed a reaction, any reaction. He gave her none. That evening, he stopped by a notary's office. Simple paperwork, bank authorizations, a freeze on non-essential household upgrades unless both parties approved. It wasn't dramatic. It was legal, fair, precise. That night, he brought home her favorite Thai takeout. No occasion, no message, just placed it on the table and walked upstairs. 10 minutes later, she came into the bedroom with the bag in her hand but didn't eat. "Okay, what's going on?" Mark closed the book in his lap. "You tell me." She crossed her arms. "Don't pull that psychology crap. You've been weird for a week." "I've just been quiet," he said. "There's a difference." "So, this is what now? The silent treatment?" Mark stood, walked past her toward the closet. "You pushed," he said, pulling down a shirt. "You wanted to see what happens when I hit my limit. Now you know." "You're being dramatic," she scoffed. "No, you're just not used to consequences." She didn't follow him out of the room. Saturday, Mark stayed out. No text, no explanation. When he came home late that night, Lauren was on the couch, trying to look unbothered, phone in hand. He walked past her like she wasn't there. Sunday morning, he did laundry in the guest room. She appeared in the doorway. "You're punishing me." "No," he said, folding a towel. "I'm learning." "Learning what?" "How to live without you." She flinched. Just a flicker, but enough. Monday, he made coffee again. 1 cup. He sat at the kitchen island. Lauren entered, clearly waiting for him to say something, anything. He didn't. "I thought we could talk." "Talk about what?" "Us." He nodded slowly. "Sure, but I'm not interested in apologies you don't mean or explanations you've rehearsed." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Mark stood and picked up his cup. "You think you're winning something here?" she snapped. He turned, looked at her, calm, focused. "No, I think I stopped playing." That night, he booked a hotel room downtown for 3 nights, not for escape, for space, for clarity. He left a simple note on the counter. "You've got the space. Let's see what you do with it." By the time Lauren read it, Mark was already gone. Mark didn't leave the hotel room to make a statement. He left to remember who he was without her constant noise. The first night, he sat by the window and watched traffic, listening to nothing but his own thoughts. No accusations, No passive-aggressive sighs, just silence. Real silence. For once, he wasn't waiting to be asked what was wrong. There was nothing wrong with him anymore. He just no longer belonged in that space she'd turned into a battlefield. Lauren texted twice that night. "You coming back tomorrow? So we're just not talking now?" He didn't reply. The next morning, her tone changed. "I'm sorry if I've gone too far. Can we talk when you're ready?" That line stood out. When you're ready. She was starting to understand something had shifted, even if she didn't fully grasp what. Instead of responding, Mark met with a divorce attorney. He didn't file anything. He asked questions about assets, property, discretionary clauses, topics he never thought he'd need to understand. He left the office with a folder full of options. That evening, he called his younger brother, Chris, someone he hadn't really talked to in years. Chris always disliked the way Lauren spoke to Mark, but he never pushed. Over drinks at a nearby bar, Mark told him everything. Chris wasn't shocked. "I always thought she liked control a little too much, but I figured if you were okay with it." "I wasn't," Mark said. "I just convinced myself that loyalty meant enduring it." Chris nodded. "That's not loyalty. That's survival." The next morning, Mark checked his phone. One missed call, a voicemail from Lauren. Her voice was softer than usual, almost unsure. "I know you're upset. I know I push. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I thought we'd argue and move on, like always. But this feels different, and I don't like how it feels." Mark replayed that last sentence. "I don't like how it feels." It wasn't about regret. It was about discomfort. She didn't miss him. She missed control. On the third day, he went home, not to talk, but to gather a few things. Lauren was in the kitchen. When she saw him, she froze. "You're back?" "Just grabbing a few things," he said, walking past her. She followed him into the bedroom. "You're not moving out, right?" Mark didn't answer. He packed a small bag, just essentials. She hovered nearby. "Are we not going to talk about this?" "We will," he said, "but not now." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't mean what I said that night. I was angry. I didn't think you'd take it seriously." "You didn't think I'd stop waiting," Mark replied. "But I did." "I can change," she said, "if you give me a chance." "You had a chance. For weeks, you kept pushing. You're overreacting." Mark turned to face her. "No, I'm finally reacting at all." Back at the hotel that night, he opened the folder from the attorney and reviewed the contents. Not out of anger, out of preparation. The following morning, Lauren sent a final text. "Please don't do this, please." He read it, set the phone down, and got dressed for the day. No panic, no second thoughts. The next week, she cycled through phases. Denial, calling him like they were just having a minor disagreement. Guilt, sending old photos, memories from vacations, blurry snapshots with captions like, "Remember this? We were good once, right?" But Mark didn't feel nostalgia. He felt distance. Each image looked like someone else's life. Then came desperation. He stopped by the house briefly one Friday. Lauren was waiting. She didn't try to argue. She looked exhausted. He didn't comment. He moved through the house, collecting files and a few personal things. She finally spoke. "Do you really hate me?" "No," Mark said, facing the shelves. "Then why won't you let me fix this?" He turned. "Because you're not trying to fix it. You're trying to reset it. You want to pretend the game didn't go too far. You're giving up on us. I'm giving up on pretending there's still an us." She didn't follow him as he left. The next morning, he filed the divorce papers. No confrontation, no yelling, just clean signatures and a handshake from a man who now knew more about Mark's life than most of his friends. He didn't tell Lauren right away. She would see the documents when they arrived. He didn't feel the need to deliver closure like a parting gift. Some things are meant to be felt, not explained. Mark didn't expect silence to feel like power, but it did. In the days after filing the paperwork, he returned to the hotel and settled into a rhythm. No calls, no explanations. Just a quiet, consistent choice to move forward. Lauren called twice the next day. Left voicemails that sounded like casual check-ins. "Just wondering what your day's like. I'll make dinner if you're back by 6. She sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. Mark didn't answer. She called again that night. No response. Then the tone shifted. Texts came with photos from their early years. Their first apartment, a ski trip in Utah, a blurry shot of them laughing on a roller coaster. Each picture was paired with a caption. Remember this day? We were happy then. I miss that version of us. But Mark didn't miss it. Looking at those moments, he didn't feel regret. He felt recognition. He saw the beginning of a pattern. His constant efforts to keep peace, her quiet withdrawals, the way every argument ended with him apologizing even when he didn't know what he'd done. He didn't reply. That weekend he met Chris again. They grabbed coffee, no agenda. Just two brothers talking for the first time in years without tension. You're not even talking about her much anymore, Chris said, sipping his drink. Mark shrugged. There's nothing left to say. You seem lighter. I feel lighter. At home, Lauren kept trying. Her messages grew longer, less defensive, more reflective. She mentioned therapy, said she'd started journaling, claimed she was working on herself. The tone was different, less polished, more uncertain. One message stood out. I used to think your silence meant you didn't care. Now I see it meant you were holding everything together. I just didn't notice. Mark read it twice, then closed the app. He still didn't answer. The few friends who knew about the separation reacted the same way, surprised at how quietly it all happened. I thought you two were fine, one coworker said. We thought you were solid, a mutual friend offered. You really kept it together, another remarked. They didn't realize that keeping it together had been the problem. Over the next month, Mark reclaimed parts of himself he hadn't realized he'd given up. He started running again in the mornings, reconnected with a few college friends, joined a local hiking group. Not to fill the silence, but to live without explaining his every move. He didn't feel angry. He felt calm. Lauren sent one more letter, a physical one, handwritten, 3 pages long. She didn't ask him to come back. She didn't beg. She explained. She admitted she'd mistaken his consistency for passivity. She said she believed he'd always stay no matter what she did. She confessed to testing him, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. She wanted to know where the boundary was. She just didn't realize she'd crossed it until it was too late. The last line of the letter stayed with him. I wish I had known where the edge was before I stepped over it. Mark folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Her final message wasn't about getting him back. It was about understanding why she'd lost him. By the second month, her messages stopped. The calls ended. Mark never blocked her. He didn't have to. Indifference does what silence alone can't. It builds walls no apology can climb. One evening, Mark walked past their old house. It was quiet. The porch light was off. No movement inside. He didn't slow down. Later that night, Chris asked him if he ever thought about giving her another chance. Mark didn't hesitate. I didn't leave because she failed. I left because I finally stopped failing myself. Mark didn't need a dramatic finish. He didn't seek revenge, closure, or even acknowledgement. What he wanted, what he'd finally achieved, was distance. And in that space, he found himself again. He moved into a modest apartment near the lake. Not because it was trendy or scenic, but because it was his. The lease had only his name. The furniture was sparse, intentional. Nothing reminded him of the compromises he used to make for the sake of keeping someone else comfortable. Lauren still texted occasionally at first. Nothing aggressive. Long messages that read like journal entries, filled with reflections in the language of self-awareness. I see now how hard you were trying. I didn't meet you halfway. I've been in therapy. I understand things I didn't before. I wasn't fair to you. I was scared, and I didn't know how to ask for what I needed without tearing things apart. Mark read them. He didn't delete them, but he never answered, because forgiveness wasn't the issue anymore. He had no anger left to process. He had already let go. He saw her once, by accident, at a grocery store. She noticed him before he noticed her. She was walking toward the produce section and stopped in her tracks. Mark didn't change direction. He just nodded politely and walked past. No words exchanged, nothing hostile, just two people who had once shared a life, now living separate ones. A few friends eventually learned what had happened. Most were shocked it had ended. Even more surprised it had ended so quietly. "You never said a word," one of them said. "How did you keep it together?" Mark thought about it. Keeping it together wasn't the goal. Leaving without setting it on fire was. Chris remained his anchor. They met weekly, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to walk. They didn't talk about Lauren much anymore. The past didn't need to be dissected repeatedly. What mattered was where Mark was now. One afternoon, Chris handed him an old photo, the two of them from college, standing outside a rundown diner, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Mark smiled. It had been a long time since he'd seen himself like that, unburdened. "She didn't erase this version of you," Chris said. "You just forgot he was still there." Lauren's final message came in a different form, a certified envelope, addressed in her handwriting. Inside was a single-page letter. It wasn't an appeal, it was acknowledgement. "You were the most patient person I've ever known. That's not why I lost you. I lost you because I thought patience meant permanence. I never imagined you'd leave. Not really. I thought I had time to fix it. I realize now that silence wasn't a pause. It was an answer. I just didn't hear it soon enough." There was no bitterness in her words, just understanding. Maybe for the first time, she wasn't writing to pull him back. She was simply accepting that he was gone. Mark placed the letter in the same drawer as the first one, not out of sentimentality, but to remember that boundaries matter more than intentions. He continued building his life, not on defiance, but on peace. He worked, traveled a bit, joined a local book club, started writing again. Things he had shelved to maintain a version of himself that fit her expectations. There was no grand epiphany, no cinematic ending, just a slow, steady return to clarity. One morning, while sitting on a park bench with a notebook, Mark overheard a young couple arguing nearby. The woman accused, the man defended. Voices low but charged. Mark didn't judge them. He just wondered if either of them truly understood what it costs to keep a relationship alive when respect goes missing. Because love isn't enough. Tolerance isn't strength, and endurance without recognition turns into self-erasure. That's what he'd learned, not through confrontation, but through letting go. Mark never told Lauren he forgave her. He didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't for her. It was in the choice to move on without resentment. His story didn't end in victory. It ended in freedom. And that, he realized, was the only ending that mattered.